In this video, we're going to be weaving a super easy color block bookmark. So let's get started. If you have seen any of our videos before, you're probably noticing our new backdrop. So this is the same room that I've always filmed in, but I have completely, and by I mean me and Cody, have completely redone this backdrop. I'm gonna step out of the way so that you can kind of see it and it can go into focus. But this is our new backdrop and I am absolutely loving it. I felt like there just needed to be a change to something that was a little bit brighter and happier and more fun and just felt more like me, and this just feels more like me now. It's not 100% done. There's still a couple more things I might want to do, but it's pretty dang close. One of them is this light switch and this doorknob. They're black, and so they're really standing out against the blue, so I kind of want to do something that will hide those a little bit more. Anyway, let's get started with this bookmark. So for the bookmark, I'm going to be using our Bookmark / bracelet recycled acrylic loom. You can find these on spruceandlinen.com. We've got 5 different colors of dishcloth cotton. So I will list and link all the materials and tools in the description box below, but I've used this for so many projects before. I really like weaving with it, and I really like this particularly for mug rugs and bookmarks. And then for the warp string, I'm going to be using 4/8 cotton. So the first thing I'm going to do is tie a loop in my warp strings. I'm going to fold this over and then tie an overhand knot to create a loop. And I'm gonna make that loop pretty small, so I'm just tightening that up. Just enough that it can slip over the little peg. I am going to be double warping my loom. So what that means is I'm going to be putting 2 strings between each notch. So I'm gonna put my loop around the first peg of my loom, then bring it up to wrap around the first peg on the top. Then I'm gonna come back down, and then here's where we'll start the double warp. So I'm gonna go back into that same groove and then back into this same groove down here. Now for this one, we are going to be weaving plain weave. So it doesn't really matter how many warp strings you have. It only matters that there's an even amount of them, because we're for the most part going to be weaving over 2 and under 2 of them at a time. So I have a total of 20 warp strings on my loom. So you can see what I did down here. Because we can't go any further this way, I actually just wrapped it around this way, around that last peg. So I'm just gonna hold on to this, grab some scissors. I'm going to leave a nice long tail. So, I don't know, 5 inches or so. And then I'm going to tie a knot at the bottom. So you can see with my right hand, I'm holding down the warp string here to keep it tight. And then I'm just gonna loop it around that last warp string, holding that tension, pulling that tight. And then I'm gonna do that again. And I typically, this is an awkward process, I realize. I typically like to do a triple knot just because I'm paranoid. So I'm gonna do that now, just so I know that for sure that last warp string is going to be secure. So once that's all tight on there, I can trim off the excess. So next what I'm going to do is actually tape down my loom. I like to use painter's tape when I tape down my loom to my table so that it doesn't scooch around like this. I used to weave like that all the time. It drove me absolutely nuts, and also Cody, who edits these videos, absolutely nuts, because it was always moving. So now I use painter's tape, and the reason I'm using a painter's tape instead of any other type is that it is meant to come off of surfaces. So it's going to be less damaging, slash, at least in my experience, it hasn't damaged any table surface I have used it on. So that's why I like to go with the painter's tape over basically anything else. So now we have that ready to go, and I'm just gonna stick this down to the table. And then I'm grabbing a piece of cardstock. This one is folded over and it is 2 inches tall. The reason I use cardstock at the bottom of my weavings is so that we have something that is both straight and firm to beat the weft down onto, so then you know that the bottom of your weaving is straight. You can take this out once you've woven a bit if you're finding your warp strings are getting too tight, but it's just one of those things that makes it easier and you don't have to measure anything at the bottom. So I'm going to weave this in over 2, under 2. So over 2, under 2, over 2, under 2, all the way across. So it's a take on plain weave. So now I'm scooching this cardstock all the way to the bottom of my loom. Now we get to start weaving. So I'm going to grab a tapestry needle. And so with our bookmark looms, we have 2 acrylic needles as well as this little acrylic comb that comes with it. I still almost always weave with my wood tapestry needle. I just prefer it. We send the little needles along with this just so that you can get started with that and nothing else if you want to, but I'm always gonna come back to my wood tapestry needle. So I'm gonna be weaving with these 5 colors, and I want to weave basically 1-inch sections with each color. I think I like this order of the colors too, so I'm gonna do them in this order. I'm gonna start with my purple. Now, because on this first section, I don't know how much yarn I'm gonna need, I think I'm gonna go with 2 arms lengths. So when I say 2 arms lengths, I stretch it out between my arms once and then another time. And now that I've done that, I can see how much I have left of this and use that to know how much I'm gonna need for the next section. So I'm going to thread my tapestry needle. We are going to start with a twining stitch first. This is going to ensure that the base is going to be nice and secure. So I'm gonna weave over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1, all the way across the room. All the way across the room? All the way across the loom. So this is just your standard tabby / plain weave. Now I'm gonna leave a nice long tail off here to the right. So I've got, you know, probably 5 or 6 inches there. And I'm gonna just kind of scooch that down a little bit. Now, everywhere where the purple yarn is going over top of the warp string, I'm going to be stitching around that to create our twining stitch. So I'm pointing my needle down from left to right here since I'm working to the right. And you can see the first one, the purple string is going under the white one. So I'm gonna go over to the next one where the purple's going over the white. And then I'm going to add an angle, grab both the purple and the white from underneath. I'm gonna pull all of this yarn through, and that's our first twining stitch. Now I am gonna be tightening this up as I go so things stay nice and secure. Now I'm gonna do that again. So I'm skipping the next one where the purple goes under the white, and I'm going to the one where the purple goes over the white, and I'm grabbing it just like so. So twining stitch is a good one that basically is gonna give you a secure base, but it will also help to evenly spread out your warp strings. So skipping the next one, going to the one after that, and we need to make sure we're looking at the right stitch here. So I'm skipping the next one and going to the one after that. And I'm just gonna do that all the way across. So after each stitch that I make, I'm sort of re-tightening both ends of the purple yarn. Now I'm at the opposite end of my loom. I'm at the very end. And the very last thing that's happening is the purple is going over the warp string. So I'm gonna go underneath that again, and that makes for my final twining stitch. So now I'm just making sure that those warp strings are nice and evened out. And now we're gonna start weaving over 2, under 2. So when we weave over 2, under 2, we're actually no longer gonna see the warp strings at all. So this is called a weft-faced cloth because the horizontal strings that we're weaving in are the weft. So we're not gonna see the warp strings at all. So it's a little bit more of a tapestry style look to the surface. So we're gonna start weaving over 2, under 2. So over 2, under 2, over 2, under 2, all the way across. And then once we get to the end, we can pull all of this through. Now what you don't wanna do, if you're a beginner, this is for you, you don't wanna do this. You don't wanna pull on this really tight. You just want to, and what sometimes I'll do is I'll sort of hold on to this far warp string, and then we're gonna create an arch. We can strum the warp a little bit, and then take the comb and push that down firmly onto the cardstock. The reason that we have to create that arch is that there needs to be slack, because the purple yarn isn't simply laying flat and straight across the warp. It's having to go over and under all the way across. So that means it actually needs a little bit more slack than just the width of the warp. So you can't just use this much yarn to get over and under. You actually need a little bit more so that it's not going to just squeeze your warp in more and more. Because if you do that, it will literally suck in these warp strings like this. And by the time you get to the top, it'll be way skinnier at the top than it is at the bottom. So now we're going to weave the next row. So we ended going under these two warp strings, so the next row will go over them. So we're doing the opposite of what we just did. Over, under, over, under. 2 strings at a time for this whole project, minus the twining stitch. So again, I'm going to pull that so it's firmly against those far warp strings, but I'm not making them really pull in. So I kind of hold on to it. I'm almost using my fingernail in this case, but you could literally just sort of hold on to it by putting your finger between those last 2 warp strings. Create your little arch. You can give it a little bit of a strum. Now, some draw-in on any weaving is pretty normal. We're trying to do it as minimally as possible. A little bit, fine, but we're trying to get our edges really nice and straight. So now the next row, again, over 2, under 2, all the way across the loom. And we're just repeating that process again, making sure that we're not pulling super tight on the edge string, creating an arch. You can give your warp a strum and then use your comb to push down those weft strings. I'm going to continue to go back and forth until I've woven a total of 1 inch. All right, so I have woven 1 inch of this purple, and I'm going to do something a little bit different. So I often end my weft on the edge. We're going to actually finish this off in the middle. So I'm just going to weave in a few rows. So I'm going to leave it down here, and then I'm going under all of these. And I'm going to cut off the excess and leave a tail. Now, here's the part where I'm going to measure this. So I have about 1 and, what is that? I'm going to go with 1.5 and see where that gets me for the next section. So I'm gonna go with the yellow next. So I'm gonna grab 1 and then maybe a little more than 1/2, just to be safe. So we're going to be starting this also in the middle. I just wanted to see what this would be like because it is easier to tuck the ends in when they're kind of off in the middle instead of all on the edge. So we're gonna give it a try. So you can see here, I wove this over these 2 and then under all of these. So the next over section is here. So I'm gonna fish this through and we're going over, under, and we'll see what this looks like. Hopefully it looks good. And then once we tuck in the ends, I'll show you how we do that so that from the front you would never even notice that we just did this. So I'm gonna take those 2 ends and I just like to kind of tuck them when I can underneath the cardstock because then they're less in the way. And now I can just start weaving just like I did with the purple. I'm gonna continue on weaving the yellow until I have 1 inch. So now I'm done the yellow. So I'm gonna end this and start the next color the exact same way that I did with the purple and the yellow. So I'm gonna end the yellow, you know, out here in the middle. And I might even go just 1 more than I did than the last one. So we'll go over this one. And once again, I have all this extra. So I'm gonna measure it again. So I did 1.5. So it seems like I actually only need 1 arm length. So next I'm grabbing the blue. Stretch it out, and I'm gonna go just a little bit more than 1. So I ended going over these ones, so then the next would be under, and then over, under. So over, under, leaving a tail, And then I can just keep weaving this blue. And I'm gonna do that for the next 2 colors as well, and then we'll meet back at the top. Okay, so now I'm at the very top of the piece, so we need to finish this off with another twining stitch. So first I'm going to go over one, under one. So just like we did the twining stitch on the other end, we start with a row of just regular plain weave over one, under one. This time it's going to be a little bit different because we're not going to just turn around and go the other way, because what happens when you do that with a twining stitch, in my experience, is it actually is going to really pull this end in like that. So I'm going to leave a nice long tail, cut off the excess, and then I'm going to use some of this extra that I had, and I'm going to start the twining stitch from this end. So everywhere the green is going over the white is where I'm stitching in. This time I'm going the opposite direction as I did in the bottom. So instead of pointing my needle this way, sort of left down to the right, we're going from the right down to the left. So here's another spot where the green is going over the white. So I'm going to grab both of those, just like so. Pull that through, and then just like on the bottom, I am going to be sort of tightening up that twining stitch as I go. Okay, so now my twining stitch is in place. You can see it's sitting a little bit crooked right now. So I want to measure my 5 inches again. And what it looks like is that the thing that needs to come down, this almost needs to go up, is this side. So I'm just going to push that down a little bit until both ends are sitting about 5 inches. And that looks pretty good to me there. So now we're going to flip this over and we're going to finish the back. So this is the part where I'm grabbing a smaller needle to tuck in the ends. You can find these pretty much anywhere that sells yarn. They're gonna have some form of this. It's called a yarn needle or a darning needle. So I'm gonna flip this over and get rid of this tape. And then what I'm gonna do is make sure that all of these loose ends that I need to tuck in are in the back. So I'm gonna pull all of these through. I have another one right here. And then I have all these green ones here. So I like to do this just so that I don't miss any. Now let's start with this bottom purple one. So I'm gonna grab my little darning needle, thread my yarn into it. So what I like to do is fold over the yarn like this, and then I go to that fold and I just kind of squish it, and I find that that always helps get yarn through these kind of needles really easily. So now we're gonna jump over to this channel here. So let's zoom in a little bit more so we can really get in there. And we're going to thread this into these loops just in the back. You can grab however many you want. I've grabbed 2, 4, 6, 8. And I'll show you when I flip this over, you can't see it from the front. So once I pull this through, I can carefully trim off the excess, make sure you don't cut anything else but that end, and then it's just kind of gonna hide in the weaving like that. So now over here, these are the ones where we connected in the middle. Now what I would like to do is sort of crisscross them. So I'm gonna take one over the other. So we'll do the purple one first. And I'm gonna take this purple over top that yellow and then down through this channel here. So just again, grabbing a bunch of those loops with your needle, pulling this through, and then being careful not to really ream on this because that's gonna just cause some issues. So I'm just sort of letting it sit in there, trim off the extra. And then with this one, we have the purple looped around it. And now I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna go through this yellow channel up here. So again, you want to make sure that when you're sewing this in, you're just grabbing the loops on the back of the piece. So again, you're not seeing that needle here at all. So I'm going to continue doing that with all these other connection points. So I'm just going to kind of crisscross these over each other and tuck them in. So in this section, we do have 2. So I'm going to take one and I'm going to just go straight down this side right here. And then the next one I just did right next to it. So then this very last one, I can take down through this channel right here. Let's check once again that this is all straight because we kind of got things a little crooked here again. And it might just be that this needs spread out a little. Now I do want to knot the warp strings on this one. I just decided I did. I do find sometimes when I just do the twining stitch and I leave it, sometimes it gets a little bit wonky over time. So I thought might as well just try doing the knots again. So I'm gonna grab 2 warp strings at a time and just kind of pull them off. Now, because we went over one string, we can just knot these together like so. These are a little bit short, I will admit, but it will work. So then I'm going to grab the next 2 and I'm just going to continue this all the way across. So taking one loop off at a time and then doing an overhand knot and just kind of situating that knot just above the twining stitch. Okay, so now that this end is all knotted, I can work on the other end. So I'm just gonna slip this off the loom. This end is gonna be a little bit different because now we have these 2 singular ends and the rest are looped. So what we need to do is cut open all those loops so that we can pair them properly. Now for this part, because it's off the loom now, I'm gonna just grab something heavy and set it down on my bookmark, and I'm going to knot this end. So it's just a little bit easier if it's not flopping all over the place. These little ends are a little on the short end, but still doable. So now I can just go across and 2 at a time, just like the other side, knot them all up. Now I have all of the knots finished. So the last thing that we need to do is simply just cut this straight. Now, are my knots perfect? No, they're not. But that's okay. We're gonna ignore where the knots are sitting and I'm literally just going to take my scissors, pick a spot and cut across. This is a pretty narrow piece, so it is pretty easy to cut it decently straight, but if you want to, you can definitely try to mark it out instead of just winging it if you prefer. So I've got one end done and now I'm gonna come back and do this end, trying to make it the same as the other end. And that looks pretty even to me there. Now you will notice, and something I wanna point out because I know for my fellow perfectionists out there, you'll notice that on one end, first of all, see there is some draw-in. We've got a little bit of draw-in. It's not a huge deal. Could I have done it a little bit better? Maybe. But it still looks really great. But what you'll notice is see how this edge looks tidier than this one? A lot of that has to do with the twist of yarn. So on one side, as you're going around that edge, it sits really nicely and in a really tidy way. And then on the other end, it doesn't. And that is just kind of the way it is, and it will always be that way because it's going in an opposite direction. So just FYI if you're a perfectionist, but we're done the bookmark. So let's have a look at the finished piece. Thank you so much for joining me. If you liked this video, check out this one next.